The lights are shining very brightly on me, so I can barely see you. And if there's anything that's happening, that's fine. If somebody can just beckon me so that I don't do that. So, as I said, my name is Charles Chirchir, and I think I've been ably introduced here. So I'll go to the topic of the conversation that I'm here to discuss. And that is about, the broader subject is cybersecurity, which is something I think we've heard about it, we hear about it every day. But if we look at the sector that we focus in here today, insurance is a sector that comes to us because of what it does. It secures, it provides us some element of fallback in the event of things not going right. And a lot of what has happened in this space has been really evolutionary, and we are getting to a point where insurance services are starting to open up to provide services online, similarly to any of the other sectors that are around us. So if we go back for a minute and look at one of the elements that came to us first in terms of securing what we've got, as systems started to open up, the first risk that we realized was that we are opening up to the world, we need to protect ourselves. And that is firewalls. And I don't need to read through this slide. It was just an indication to show you that there's been a lot which has happened in this space from the late 80s, when systems started going online and we started working through the internet, up to today, where we are in the cloud. There's been firewalls which protected us against the external world. Essentially, firewalls are perimeter security. Now, while all this has happened, it worked well when we operated in a secure four-wall type of an environment. But as we've opened up, it has only secured us part. There's a lot of other risks that come to us, and we'll go to that. If we look at where we are today, and I picked up some data from, I believe a number of us are familiar with the service provided by Communication Authority, where they track incidences in the country. And this is data from March 2024, so January to March 2024. A lot of the risks that have been identified was around systems, and then malware, and then web application, DDoS, all that. So what you realize is, while the firewalls still continue to do what it was meant to do, there is a whole range of other types of attack that come to us within organizations, and insurance is one of them. Probably the reason why this is a big deal in the insurance industry is because if you listen to the kind of numbers Julius has just spoken about, $2 billion, that's not small money. And a lot of the, unfortunately, cyber world is trying to hack organizations where there is value, where they are able to derive value out of whatever they are doing. So, that said, how do you protect yourself against a number of the risks that are now out there? And some of these are out of the fact that technology advanced, there are bad actors out there, and we are also trying to automate the services that we provide in order to make it easier and attract all the different categories of users that we've got. We've got some who are traditional, like me. Maybe I'm happy with email, and somebody else came in and they are happy with social media. And we are moving on with all this. We have to provide services. So with that, then I go to one of the areas that we spend a lot of time in our company, and that is identity. And probably if I just back up one, if you look at a number of these type of attacks, if you look at malware, for example, why is it that the attackers are able to hit us using malware? The first thing is to install some form of programs in your systems, in whichever way that they can get there. And the second thing that they do is to look for some identity, some mechanism of how to get through the network, because we all are smart people. We protect our systems using username, password, and some form of encryption of the data. So if somebody can land on an identity that has got accesses to a number of systems within the organization, then they've won the first one, because then they can be able to operate similar to whoever is authorized to do that particular role. So that's a lot of how what malware tend to do a lot of their attacks. systems attack, typically these are normally things which you can be able to detect using vulnerability solutions. Do you have points within your network or within your applications where people are able to hit you? So to go into what I would like to just spend a few minutes on, identity. Again, this is not something new. And if I go back to borrow from Julius's history, I think we all know that at birth, everybody is named. We name everything that around us, and that's the way that we identify. And to some extent, that is adequate, depending on what is the need. So as we all came in here, we've identified ourselves, and we've got a tag here. As we go into the machine world, sometimes it's not just enough to go and say, my name is Charles Chirchir. We are asked for a password. And that served us for some time until people started looking for ways of how to hack passwords. And as everything becomes sophisticated to where we are today, then identity becomes something which is still very simple in its definition, but you've got to get sophisticated about how you identify the people within that you permit to perform certain tasks. And so you get all these different types of networks, hybrid networks, digital. And we've spoken here about the trend. And if I borrow from the first slide from Harry, everybody's going to the cloud. So while we are in the cloud, how do you identify yourself? How do you distinguish yourself in the cloud? Because now that moves out of our regular geographies and it goes out there. And so the attack that is happening on identity is exploding. It's an area that provides, it's a very high risk area in the sense that if your identity gets breached, then whoever has breached your identity is going to be able to exactly replicate the things which you do. And as we start to get into all the various systems that we've talked about, AI and all that, then you are also talking about a level of complexity where to be able to respond in seconds, which again, Julius has spoken to, and then it means you are passing information from one system to another, and identifying whoever it is. If it is me, for example, seeing a doctor, then my identity has to be used to validate all the data that exists in the system. So it's no longer just about me coming to an organization. It's about my information being used in various systems, and therefore certain identities have to be used. So that's where it becomes complex. And so in order to be able to manage this, like everything else that we all do when we try to get structured, is to talk about a framework. And from the identity space, what are the things we talk about? The first is about who. So this is all how we've all identified ourselves. Probably the second thing was about, as we came into the room, we asked, I'm here for InsurTech, and they'll tell you, this is the way you go. And some of the other bits about identities, because when we are in the cyberspace, somebody has to issue these identities. So who is it who issued you the identity? So in this case, if it is InsurTech which issued me the identity, then InsurTech needs to also protect the identities that it is issuing out, so that only the people that it has invited or authorized can be able to come in. Otherwise, if anybody can issue that identity, then we are all in trouble. And all the other questions about when and where, all these things are the things which we need to ask ourselves. And again, to go back to the first part, which is about who. So that's authentication, saying who it is that you are. What is authorized? We have been authorized, we've been allowed to come here. And then where and all this start to become, where the complexity starts to come. You're about enrollment. And then when is about, if you are an employee in the organization, you are not going to be going there and re-identifying yourself every day. You'll have been given an identity at the point at which you join the organization. And I can keep going back to this organization as long as I remain an employee of this organization. And should my workstation change, then it should be, move along with me, so that if today maybe I'm working in city center and I move to Westlands or wherever else I move, then that bit needs to move with me. And that's where complexity starts to come, because a lot of times, again, as we join organizations, you will be identified within that organization. But if it's a large organization, as you start to move around, Do you want to allow everybody, maybe from head office, to be going to your branches and vice versa and all that? And there are risks to that. So this bit about life cycle starts to come in. And then there are other things which we also need to address. And a big risk which happens a lot in our IT systems is people who moved on and left the organization, and we end up with what we call orphaned accounts. And therefore, you've got an account, you've got an identity, which refers to somebody that worked before but is no longer in the organization and can be used by other people for whatever purposes that they want. And those are things which we need to take care of. And again, for those of us who are in IT, we've talked about regulatory. And a lot of times we have to report. Maybe if it is in the banking sector, it's to the central bank, who is the regulator. If it is in the insurance, probably to the insurance regulator, to say, how are we managing all this? So the other question which we also look at is, as we talk about identity, one of the things you want to do is to simplify things. If you make it so complex for me to identify myself, we are all clever people. We look for other ways of doing it. If I have to answer 10 questions before you let me to do something, then probably I'll look for my friend and I'll tag along and whatever it is. So human beings, again, by virtue of being clever, want it simple. So as we try to simplify, then we introduce a number of other technologies that help us. And this is a range of them, and I'm not going to go through all of them. A number of these you are familiar with. Probably the point which we come to is with the fact that you've seen what the environment is. It's cloud, it is hybrid networks, it's AI, it's all this. Which of this is going to work? And then operationally, which is efficient? We also don't want to make our environment so complex that it is almost impossible to work. So you make a choice based on what you want to do. I'll give you an example. If you go to the banks, the bank tellers typically will operate in their cubicle and they'll dispense money. They'll receive, they will give you money. But typically, some of the banks I know don't allow their staff to go into that booth with their mobile phone. At the moment, the mobile phone is a very easy tool that we all use for doing very many things. So because you are not allowing these people to come into their workstation with a phone, how will you ensure that they can still, authenticate and do what is required? And for that case, you will issue them with this hardware token, which, at the point at which they come as part of their job, you issue them with that. For somebody else, I'm out in the field, the device I carry most of the time is the phone. Please give me a method of identifying myself on my phone so that I don't have to carry a device here and a phone here and a laptop here. All those things just make our life complicated. So while you are trying to simplify, the technology part gets complex. Now, the other thing is about how we actually do these identities. With all this environment that we've got, and we've talked about quite a number of them, if we start from your left side, so there'll be an identification process. And then there's another element that comes into this, which is about the risk level. So at certain times, what I'm doing is fairly straightforward. I'm just reading my emails or reading files, no risk to nobody. And after that, I am going to take on whichever role that I play in the organization. I've assumed that I'm the finance director, I'm so-and-so, and I'm going to be authorizing certain amounts of monies or issuing POs, whatever it is. Then the level of risk of what I'm doing will change. So from my regular reading emails to approving transactions, the risk has gone up. So as your risk goes up, then you are somewhere on this map. So how do you manage your identities so that the simple things that I do that don't require so much protection are not treated the same as where I'm performing a higher risk activity? Say, for example, I'm a HR manager, I hire staff. So at the point at which I give contracts, probably that's something I need to be very careful about. You don't end up giving contracts which were not intended. Or similarly, if I'm going to terminate people or whichever. But on a day-to-day basis, I'll be communicating company messages and telling people how the organization is doing. So again, depending on what you are doing. So this is where, again, a number of systems have come up. And as the risk of what you are doing goes up, then you invoke what you call a step up so that you will step up the requirement. And this tends to come more from the application. So in the application, you will be able to say, in order to perform this size of transaction, please provide me identities of 2 people, maybe passwords of 2 people, maybe authentication codes, whatever it is. So that is where all this comes in. So there's some security, you build in some intelligence to be able to access. And then the last part, which I also want to mention, is there are very many IT companies out there. So if I come today and I am from Microland, we support a solution from a company called RSA, somebody else will come with another one. And we start, everybody is issuing you with this piece of device. When you want to authenticate, use this. So you end up with 10 different ones, which you need to carry around. So there's, this FIDO Alliance, which have come up, and they are trying to unify some of this. So the people who subscribe to it will give you the same hardware token or software, and you can use it across multiple systems. That way, again, is trying to simplify the environment in which you operate. Again, a little bit of intelligence into the whole of that process. I won't go into too much of this. This is an area that we normally have conversations about, of simplifying. And again, using part of what has been discussed here, using AI to be able to determine the level of risk and therefore decide whether this activity which is to be performed is of a level of risk commensurate to the identity or the authentication that has been provided. If it is going to be of a higher, then it's going to be asking for either denying that type of access or asking for additional credentials. So that is just, again, a schematic of how that is done in identity assurance environment. The last one which I want to just mention is around governance of identity. I've already mentioned some of this. And again, governance is more about the rules, the guidelines, the procedures that you have within an organization. Traditionally, in smaller organizations and before you do a lot of automation, a lot of these they come naturally. If I'm appointed as the manager of a particular department, there'll be certain things which I check. But as we start delegating these tasks to be automated, then how is it that they are being managed? And again, as the numbers increase, if you are an organization of 10 people, then it's easy. You remember, you know everybody. If you're 100 people, a little bit more complex. If you are 1,000 people, you barely know everybody and the workstation that they sit in. So there are a number of tasks that will need to be performing, which is about life cycle management, the roles that people are playing. I may have joined the organization as a technical person within an IT department. And over the years, I have moved on, and maybe I'm now holding the role of manager. And as my role has changed, did somebody take care of the identity and the credentials so that it matches with my role? And this is, again, part of automation, so that as people move on to new roles within the organization, then instead of having to keep changing for a particular individual, you'll just be mapping the role to the individual, and that way you simplify your management. You'll see a lot of this with the very highly regulated institutions, where they define those roles very clearly, and they will also identify the tasks that you are supposed to perform, and therefore the accesses that you need within your various systems that you have within the organization. And again, this can be relatively simple. It can be a bit more sophisticated with built-in use of, where we are in terms of technology, with AI, with machine learning. So really, without going into a lot of details on this, because this is an area we spend a lot of time on, and we can talk about all these various systems, and maybe with those that would want to be looking at it in a lot of detail, then we'll be able to do that. But I think suffice for this presentation, mine was really to say, while firewalls and the traditional methods of protecting ourselves have served us well in the past, technology has moved so fast that we are having to go back to those basic definitions again, and those basic definitions like identity start to become something that we need to look at in more detail so that we ensure that it continues to serve us going forward. So that's where I would like to stop, and I believe there'll be a session to be able to answer some of the questions if there are any, but thank you very much.